Testing 1, 2, 3. Hi everyone, and welcome to another Woke Wednesday. This podcast was created to shed light on different societal issues which have been at the forefront of public discourse through one of the most divisive times in American history. More so, it was created with the intent of allowing those who have often been neglected, shunned, or misunderstood to have a chance to share their experiences and thoughts. I hope this dialogue encourages critical conversation and activism amongst all listeners. And I hope you'll tell all your friends about it and share it on your social platforms. Now, let's get into these current events. Students at a private high school in Brooklyn are protesting the lack of transparency on school administration's part when a racist, misogynistic, and homophobic video circulated the school recently. Although the video was shot a few years ago, it has only surfaced now for others to see. Students are frustrated with the lack of effort on the administration's behalf to dismantle the racist culture at Fieldston, which is the school. Nearly 90 students took place in the protest and locked administration and faculty and staff out of the school from Monday until Wednesday until their demands for accountability for the students in the video to be made public, more transparency, and a new system for reporting bias to administration, and lastly, racial bias training for all staff and parents. They also demanded that the school recruits more students and faculty of color and introduce a mandatory, and yes, I mean mandatory, Black Studies course to the curriculum. Y'all, that shit is incredible. I am so proud of these students for sticking to what they believe and standing up for what is right and calling the administration out on their BS and saying, no, we will not take this racist culture at our school to continue. We will not allow it. So props to them. Movements like this is exactly what has the potential to shift cultural norms and biases to a more even and equitable playing field for all humans, regardless of their background. It also goes to show how revolutions are being played over and over historically, being that these were young people that took part in this protest, and young people were at the heads of other historical movements for social change, such as Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and many others. We're also seeing protests prompted by ones that started in Europe, but have trickled over to the US. Students skipped school on March 15th as a protest call for more activism in regards to climate change. These students are pushing Congress members to pass the new Green Deal, which will speed up the process in transitioning our planet to carbon-free energy and remaking the economy to spread wealth more evenly. If you don't know, this protest actually started months ago in Sweden when 16-year-old Greta Thunberg began skipping school on Fridays to protest outside of Sweden's parliament in protest of the country's position on climate change reform. The 16-year-old criticized the global elite at the World Economic Forum by putting the blame on them for the climate crisis, and she spoke at the United Nations Climate Conference in which she told the climate change negotiators they weren't mature enough to tell it like it is. Y'all, if I ever have kids, I feel like that's how my child will be. Because of her protests, thousands of students globally have followed suit and are skipping school to demand their governments take concrete action to combat climate change. These students have unanimously agreed that for them, missing school is secondary because what good is going to school if climate change is ultimately going to destroy our future? Which is a good point because at what point will our government officials and news outlets wake the fuck up and realize that the actual security of our planet's future and our futures are at stake if we don't start taking this seriously and implementing major reforms that will prevent that from happening. Now, let's get into this week's episode. Being from the South, I've been immersed into this idea of Southern culture since my birth. Not only that, being Black and being a woman has shaped my ideas and perspectives in terms of Southern culture and its evolution. But what does it mean to be a Southerner exactly? And what is Southern culture? There are several coinciding factors that make up the South. Southern history, race, gender, iconography, and the economy all contribute to Southern identity and culture. Historically, the South has been and is still home to some of the most regressive and bigoted policies and laws to date. Economic progress in the South was built on slavery and forced labor that were used to cultivate cash crops such as cotton and tobacco, which led to an economic boom during that time era. Despite the atrocious treatment of slaves in these states, the money-growing business of slavery held fast for 400 plus years until the Civil War erupted. After the Civil War, which the main reason for the Civil War was slavery, if you didn't know, a lot of people like to say otherwise, but it was slavery. Anyways, the segregation of black and white people remained ever so prevalent with the implementation of Jim Crow laws that are reminiscent today through the voting systems, housing policies, the criminal justice system, and so much more. With the oppressive system ingrained in the South's history, it's no surprise that remnants of it today are still very present. Yet, as time has passed, economics today in the South have been shifting from a more agricultural one to a more urbanized economy. Especially with Georgia's new entertainment media influence, the South's economy is progressively shifting, which will be interesting for future politics in Georgia, being that the agricultural production in the South is very relative to conservative leading ideologies. And no, Stacey Abrams didn't say that the South's economy needs to dismiss agriculture. She just highlighted that there are other opportunities for revenue in this region, which there are. It's also important to note the division of different states in the South that are happening right now economically. There are stagnant states which are declining economically and in population, being Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana. This is impacting each state's national influence and heightening traditionalistic cultural tendencies. Other states are growing at rapid paces with the influx of new kinds of businesses and diverse demographics. Georgia and South Carolina, for example, have increased migration of Hispanic and Latinx citizens and have invested in alternative businesses to spur growth. Cultural symbols like the Confederate flag have long been a part of Southern history as well. While the Confederate flag is an obvious symbol of racism and discrimination towards African Americans, white nationalists and Tea Party members attribute the flag to their history and claim that it should remain flying as a reminder of it. But if they want to learn about their history, they can read a fucking book, because the Confederate flag only contributes to the racist practices that promote hate towards black people and should be treated as such. I'm just saying, I don't need to see that shit flying anywhere, period. Not only that, Confederate monuments should be treated in the same regards, because displaying these individuals that only wanted to promote abhorrent treatments towards black people is insulting, to say the least, as a black person. Because, like I said, I personally have no desire to see huge glorifications of people that wanted to keep people that look like me enslaved. I don't want to see their ass down the street, on college campuses, i.e. UGA, because UGA has a lot of Confederate monuments, if you didn't know. I don't need to see it, period. They need to take them down. I don't understand why that is something that is so hard for people to comprehend. Moreover, from a cultural studies perspective, symbols of difference, as theorized by Stuart Hall, are present among systems of meaning. People perceive things differently, so naturally, conflict can erupt among specific symbols. Southern symbols specifically are so rooted in a racist and misogynistic history that they become particularly divisive items. Other Southern representations that are particularly divisive include cultural texts with a number of white savior narratives guising genuine nuances of racial dynamics of the region. Southern identity is also comprised of this idea of maintaining traditional gender norms for the most part, although this is slowly shifting. That idea of a Southern belle without any agency has long been a goal for Southern women to maintain and grow into. Yet, as the demographics of the South are changing, so is that expectation. Thank God. Women, especially minority women, have had difficulty gaining leadership opportunities in the region, and we especially saw that in the last governor race between Stacey Abrams and Brian Kemp. Kemp was accused, and he did, suppress minority voices in an effort to become Georgia's next governor. Abrams, on the other hand, was propelled into national spotlight for her charisma, ability to relate to everyday people, and her political background, being that she was the Democratic House Minority Leader. Not only that, holistically, as the South is becoming the fastest growing region in the country with the influx of the Latinx community, increasing African American populations, and an increase in Asian American populations, it'll be very interesting to see how political positions begin to shift as these demographics are starting to now change. Literally, with the 2020 Census Bureau, the South is expected to gain 5 congressional seats, which would impact future elections, especially because the South makes up 1/3 of all electoral college votes. Even though we should abolish the electoral college, but that's a conversation for another day. Anyways, for me, as a born and raised Southerner, I've never particularly found identity with major Southern practices, with the exception of food norms and the idea of Southern hospitality. Other than that, I've always struggled to accept identifying with the South as a whole because of the South's history and current treatment towards Black people, brown people, LGBTQ communities, and other disadvantaged communities. Obviously, I'm very grateful to see the shift the South is taking in terms of open acceptance of all types of people, yet the slow rate it's happening is honestly very frustrating. It's just another reminder that while changes have obviously been made, there's still far more to be made.
The American South.
13 states in the Southeast stretching from Virginia to Texas.
Who feels that?
A region with a shared social, economic, and political history that has greatly influenced the trajectory of the country since the United States was born. And today is no exception.
We must love each other and protect each other.
Today, the South is in the midst of a historic transformation.
Live a healthy community
That will have a profound impact on the entire country and on our collective future. Here's why.
The South is powerful.
The South is the fastest growing region in the U.S. Half of America's population growth over the last 6 years has been in these 13 states. And with this growth comes rising political clout. Right now, the South is home to 1/3 of all electoral college votes, which determine who becomes president. And after the 2020 census, the region is likely to gain 5 more congressional seats. This means the South has growing potential to influence the priorities of the whole country.
The South is diverse and dynamic.
The South is white urban and rural communities. And it is home to the Black Belt, a stretch of counties with large African American populations, both urban and rural. Today, half of all African Americans in the U.S. live in the 13 southern states. And return migration is bringing more and more African Americans back to the South. But it's not just black and white. 7 of the 10 states with the fastest growing Latinx populations are in the South. And 4 of the 10 states with the fastest growing Asian and Asian American communities are in the South as well. And gay, lesbian, and transgender people are building their futures in the South's big cities and its small towns. Throughout these communities, the South is home to innovators, artists, and activists.
Let's change the world, y'all.
With a deep love for the region and the drive and passion to make it thrive.
The South is an incubator.
Many of our country's most regressive policies were and are forged and tested in the South.
In the name of Jesus, this flag has to come down.
But the South and its diverse culture has also been a springboard for visionary thinking.
Even in the hard times, we become
who our voices ultimately are.
It's the birthplace of movements that have transformed the country.
The South is ready.
Today, the South is entering what could be described as a third Reconstruction. The first Reconstruction launched a record number of African American officials into public office, pioneering policies for expanding public education, labor rights, and democratic access. The Civil Rights Movement, a second Reconstruction, ended Jim Crow laws and sparked liberation movements across the South and the whole country. And today, some of the most innovative social justice campaigns in the country are conceived and led by local organizers in the South. Communities in the region are also promoting a transition from dependence on polluting power sources to an economy fueled by clean energy.
We want a just transition, one that is equitable to all.
These are some examples. There are countless others.
Exploitation's got to go!
This is the South today.
Let the world see some black and white folk hugging each other.
A region of immense promise and potential that, with the right investments, could drive a period of profound change for the entire country. Now is the time to realize the true promise of this vibrant and powerful region.
Lastly, I also want to emphasize that within the South, political landscapes are constantly evolving. We saw that evidently not only in the Georgia governor race as Stacey Abrams narrowly won, but in the Alabama Senate race when Doug Jones unseated a 25-year Republican Alabama Senate seat. Jones was the prosecutor against the KKK members that planted the church bomb that killed 4 little black girls in Birmingham, Alabama. While Trump obviously carried the South by a landslide, that doesn't mean that those particular ideologies are representative of everyone in the South. NBC recently took a poll which detailed stiff opposition to Trump's re-election amongst the majority of women, Americans of all age ranges under 65, Hispanics, blacks, the white college-educated, urban residents, and suburban residents all said that they would definitely not vote for him in 2020. Yet, the two major groups of Republicans and white evangelical Protestants were the only two demographics that included majorities saying that they would definitely support Trump in 2020. We'll definitely see how it all unfolds in the race, being that Democratic nominees are announcing their candidacy left and right. We'll also see where the South falls in terms of what states Trump wins and loses in the 2020 election. I think things are going to change, hopefully. I hope that this episode was informative and thought-provoking for all that listened and for those that will listen in the future. I hope that as we see the South slowly evolving into a more progressive region, that we continue pushing for people not to be complacent in keeping with tradition and the norm. Growing means being uncomfortable for some, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't shy away from it either. As the South slowly grows more blacker, browner, more pro-women in some aspects, LGBTQ friendly and welcoming to all people of all backgrounds, we should continue embracing those people and hopefully create new Southern cultural norms. Remember, all of these opinions are my own, but they should be everyone else's. Have a woke Wednesday. Thank you for another Woke Wednesday. Transcripts of entire episodes will be available on the Woke Wednesday website. Episodes are written and produced by Hannah Mason and Trey Leonard of Linico Entertainment. Episodes are hosted by Hannah Mason and edited by Trey Leonard. All graphics are designed by Anna French